Picture this. You're a retired Navy electrician minding your own business in your new neighborhood when your electric bill jumps from $127 to $347 in 1 month. That's what happened to me. So I did what any sensible person would do. I grabbed my multimeter and started hunting. What I found made my blood boil. An extension cord, thick as a garden hose, snaking from my outdoor outlet across 150 feet of carefully hidden landscape, straight to my neighbor's pristine white Tesla Model S. And there she was, Darlene Wickshire, HOA president and professional pain in the rear, smirking at me from her driveway like she'd just won the lottery. "You should be grateful," she said, not even bothering to unplug her car. "I'm helping the environment." The audacity, the sheer breathtaking audacity. What would you do if you caught your neighbor literally stealing hundreds of dollars in electricity? Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I want to see how many of you have dealt with HOA nightmares like this. Let me back up and tell you how I ended up in this mess. My name's Marcus Hendricks, and 6 months ago, I inherited my grandmother's little ranch house in Willowbrook Estates, a 47-home HOA community in the Arizona desert, where the heat makes you question your life choices and the neighbors make you question humanity. I'm 52, spent 20 years in the Navy as an electrician, and after my wife Sarah lost her battle with cancer 2 years back, I needed a fresh start. Somewhere quiet where I could run my freelance contracting business and maybe find some peace. The house came with decent bones, a 2-car garage perfect for my workshop, and what I thought was a friendly neighborhood. Boy, was I wrong about that last part. Willowbrook Estates looks nice enough from the street cookie-cutter homes built in 1995, desert landscaping, those fancy streetlights that give everything a warm glow. The HOA fees were $89 a month, supposedly covering landscaping and common area maintenance. But walking around that first week, I noticed things. Dead plants everywhere, broken streetlights casting weird shadows, sidewalks cracked worse than my old Navy ship after a storm. Where exactly was that $89 per month going? Then I met Darlene. Darlene Wickshire rolled up to my driveway on day 3, climbing out of her Tesla like she was stepping onto a red carpet. 48 years old, perfectly styled blonde hair that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, wearing designer athleisure that screamed, "I do yoga but only the expensive kind." Her lawn looked like something out of a magazine, which was weird, considering everyone else was hand-watering brown patches. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said, but her smile had all the warmth of a rattlesnake's handshake. "I'm Darlene, HOA president. We need to discuss some violations." Violations? I'd been there 3 days. She pulled out a clipboard because of course she had a clipboard and started rattling off problems. My trash can was positioned 3 inches too far from the curb. My hedge was too wild and needed professional trimming. My house numbers were the wrong font according to the architectural guidelines. The smell of her vanilla perfume was so overpowering I had to step back. It mixed with the metallic taste of Arizona morning heat, creating this nauseating combination that I'd learned to associate with trouble. But here's the kicker. She fined me $150 for parking my work van in the driveway overnight. According to her interpretation of the HOA covenants, temporary contractor parking only applied to residents hiring contractors, not residents who were contractors. I paid the fine. I know. First mistake. But I'd just moved in, didn't want drama, and figured it was easier to keep the peace. Plus, I noticed her son's lifted Ford F-250 sitting permanently in her driveway, complete with truck nuts hanging from the hitch and LED light bars that could probably be seen from space. Apparently, some vehicles were more equal than others. The HOA board consisted of 3 people: Darlene, her lapdog Stan Bromwell, who nodded at everything she said like a dashboard bobblehead, and Patricia Gomez, a soft-spoken woman who seemed uncomfortable during our brief introduction. Patricia had this look in her eyes like someone who wanted to speak up but had been beaten down too many times. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing patterns. The automatic sprinkler system on Darlene's property ran twice as long as everyone else's, while neighbors like elderly Ralph Torino hand-watered their dying plants with garden hoses. The community landscaping crew, which should have been maintaining common areas, spent most of their time perfecting Darlene's personal paradise. Something stank worse than the morning desert air, and it wasn't just the heat. The real trouble started 3 weeks later when my tools began disappearing from my garage. Nothing dramatic, just a cordless drill here, a voltage tester there. The kind of stuff that walks away when you're not paying attention, except I always lock up my equipment. 20 years in the Navy teaches you to secure your gear. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I installed security cameras. Nothing fancy, just a basic system covering my driveway, garage, and backyard. The kind of setup that would make any honest neighbor feel perfectly comfortable. Darlene was not an honest neighbor. The footage revealed everything. There was Darlene's landscaping crew, a motley bunch of guys in torn t-shirts driving a truck held together with duct tape and prayers, using my outdoor spigot like it was their personal water source. They'd roll up at 6 a.m., hook up their hoses, and fill their truck tank with my water before heading off to maintain the neighborhood's dying vegetation. The squeak of that hose reel being unwound at dawn became my unwelcome alarm clock. But it was the audacity that really got me. These guys weren't even trying to hide it. When I knocked on Darlene's door with the printed screenshots, she didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. "Community water rights," she said, examining her manicured nails like we were discussing the weather. "It's all in the HOA documents." Community water rights? I'd read those documents cover to cover. Twice. "Show me," I said. She waved her hand dismissively. "Page 40-something. I don't have time to educate every new resident about basic community policies." Then came the threat. "Also, those cameras need to come down. They're visible from the street, which violates our architectural guidelines. I'll need them removed by Friday, or you'll face another fine." The crunch of gravel under my work boots sounded especially loud as I walked back to my house, jaw clenched tight enough to crack walnuts. But here's the thing about being a Navy electrician: you learn to channel anger into problem solving. I spent that evening with a legal pad, a highlighter, and every single page of our HOA documents. Page 47 contained the water usage clause, all right. It was crystal clear. Each resident is responsible for individual water consumption and billing. No shared usage permitted without written board approval and cost-sharing agreement. No community water rights, no free-for-all spigot access. Just good old-fashioned theft. But that wasn't the only interesting thing I found. The HOA financial reports showed Darlene's landscaping crew receiving $20,800 per month for common area maintenance. I'd walked every inch of our neighborhood. There wasn't $280 worth of maintenance happening, let alone $20,800. I remembered from my Navy days that most government contracts had similar audit requirements, and something I'd read once stuck with me. HOA boards must follow state nonprofit laws, which means members can request financial audits with 30 days written notice, and the board legally cannot refuse. My counterpunch was swift and surgical. First, I installed a lockable spigot cover that would have made Fort Knox jealous. Then I posted private property no trespassing signs around my water sources. Finally, I printed out the relevant HOA bylaws and taped them to my front door, with the water usage clause highlighted in bright yellow. But I wasn't done. A quick internet search revealed that Darlene Wickshire, real estate agent extraordinaire, had 2 formal complaints filed against her license. Both involved misrepresentation of property conditions to buyers. Interesting pattern. The next morning brought the sweet sound of frustrated Spanish cursing as the landscaping crew discovered their free water had dried up. Through my kitchen window, I watched them try the spigot, rattle the lock, then make increasingly animated phone calls. 20 minutes later, my doorbell rang. "You can't lock community resources," Darlene announced, standing on my porch like an indignant flamingo. Today's perfume was even stronger vanilla mixed with something floral that made my eyes water. "Show me the community water rights clause," I replied, holding up my highlighted copy of the HOA documents. She snatched the papers, scanned page 47, and her face went through more color changes than a desert sunset. This is outdated. We updated the water policy last month." "Great, I'll need a copy of that updated policy along with the board meeting minutes where it was approved and the written notification to residents as required by state law." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "I'll wait," I added helpfully. She never produced those documents. Funny how that works. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood. Ralph Torino knocked on my door that afternoon, clutching a manila folder thick with documentation. Turns out, he'd been dealing with Darlene's harassment for 3 years. Patricia Gomez called that evening, speaking in hushed tones about board meetings where she was steamrolled whenever she asked questions about finances. The pattern was becoming clear. Anyone who questioned Queen Darlene got the royal treatment. But here's what I'd learned from military bureaucracy: documentation beats intimidation every single time. The tools stopped disappearing. The landscaping crew found other water sources, and I learned something valuable. Bullies only respect one thing: the moment you stop backing down. 2 weeks of blissful quiet passed before Darlene's next move. I should have known she was plotting something when I spotted her having hushed conversations with Stan Bromwell across 3 different driveways. The man nodded so much during these chats I wondered if his neck was spring-loaded. Then the official notice arrived. Emergency architectural review meeting, 24-hour notice. Emergency? My cameras had been up for a month. My fence stain had been the same color since before she was born. But there it was in black and white, a $500 fine for unauthorized modifications, and a demand that I appear before the Architectural Review Board to defend my violations. I knew enough about HOA law from my research to smell the setup. Most states require 72 hours minimum notice for official meetings. This was either incompetence or desperation, and Darlene struck me as too calculating for incompetence. But while I was focused on her architectural theatrics, she was playing a completely different game. My electric bill arrived 3 days later, and my coffee went cold in my mouth as I stared at the numbers. $347. Last month had been $127. The month before, $134. I'd been careful with my usage hell. I'd been obsessive about it since inheriting a fixed-income house. The metallic taste of anger filled my mouth as I grabbed my electrical meter and started hunting. It didn't take long. The extension cord was hidden like a covert ops mission snaking under decorative rocks, threading through mulch beds, camouflaged with landscape fabric. But I'd done electrical work in hostile territory before, and amateurs always make the same mistakes. The cord ran 150 feet from my exterior outlet, around my fence, through Ralph's oleander bushes, and straight to a discreet charging setup behind Darlene's Tesla. Professional-grade outdoor cable, weatherproof connections, even a timer system. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment theft. This was premeditated, calculated, and probably expensive to set up. I followed that cord like I was defusing a bomb, documenting every foot with photographs. When I plugged my meter into the circuit, the numbers made my blood pressure spike. 47 amps during charging cycles. That Tesla was sucking down electricity like a vampire, and I was paying for every electron. Quick math told the story. Roughly $220 in stolen electricity over 6 weeks. In Arizona, theft of utilities becomes a Class 6 felony when the value exceeds certain thresholds. I'd need to research the exact numbers, but Darlene was definitely swimming in criminal waters. Armed with evidence, I marched over to her house. She answered the door in yoga pants and a tank top that probably cost more than most people's car payments, holding a green smoothie that smelled like expensive disappointment. "We need to talk about my electricity bill," I said, holding up the photographs. She glanced at the pictures without even a flicker of surprise. "I have no idea what you're talking about. This is your extension cord, running from my outlet to your Tesla charging port. That cord was here when I moved in. Previous tenant must have left it." The lie was so smooth, so practiced, that I almost admired the craftsmanship. Almost. Previous tenant, huh? The one who moved out 2 years before I moved in? She shrugged. "I don't keep track of every piece of junk in my yard." To prove her innocence, she walked over and unplugged the cord with theatrical flourish. "There. Problem solved." I thanked her politely and went home. 2 hours later, I checked the outlet again. Different cord, same setup, same Tesla getting fed my electricity. This woman had backup theft equipment. But here's where military training pays off. When someone shows you their tactics, you plan around them. I installed a hidden trail camera focused on my outlet area, positioned to capture both the connection point and anyone approaching it. Then I settled in to document patterns. The camera revealed Darlene's full operation. She had 3 different extension cords, rotating them to avoid creating obvious wear patterns. She charged primarily between 2 and 6 a.m. when I'd be asleep. She'd even trained her teenage son to swap out cords when she was traveling for real estate showings. Ralph's security system provided another angle. His cameras caught Darlene's late-night cord runs from a different perspective, showing her checking my windows to make sure I wasn't watching. The woman was thorough, I'd give her that. But what really caught my attention was reviewing Ralph's footage from the past 3 months. Other neighbors had mysteriously rising electric bills, too. Janet Crowley mentioned her summer usage seemed unusually high. The Hendersons in the corner house were considering solar panels because their bills had doubled. I'd uncovered something bigger than petty theft. This was a systematic operation. The emergency architectural meeting proceeded exactly as you'd expect. Darlene and Stan tag-teamed me with violations that would make a tax auditor blush. But Patricia Gomez surprised everyone by asking pointed questions about proper meeting notice and whether the board had authority to retroactively fine existing improvements. Darlene's perfect composure cracked just slightly when Patricia requested copies of all architectural guidelines referenced in the violation notice. "I'll email those later," Darlene snapped. Those emails never came. Funny how that works. Darlene's desperation became obvious when she called another emergency HOA meeting just 5 days later. This time, she wanted to vote me a non-compliant resident with a $200 monthly penalty until my violations were corrected. The sheer audacity was breathtaking, like watching someone triple down on a losing poker hand. She even brought reinforcements, a lawyer friend named Bradley something or other, who wore a cheap suit and kept emphasizing that he wasn't officially representing anyone, just concerned about community standards, the kind of legal intimidation that works on people who don't know their rights. I wasn't those people. I showed up with my own ammunition, printed copies of Arizona HOA statutes, our community bylaws, and a digital voice recorder. Arizona is a single-party consent state, which means I could record everything as long as I was part of the conversation. Something I'd learned during my divorce proceedings: always document everything when dealing with people who operate in bad faith. "Before we begin," I announced, "I'm invoking my right under Arizona revised statutes to request a comprehensive financial audit of this HOA. I'm submitting my written request now, which gives you 30 days to provide complete banking records, contracts, and expenditure documentation." The color drained from Darlene's face like someone had pulled a plug. That's not necessary," she stammered. "We have regular financial reviews." "Conducted by whom? When? And why haven't residents received copies as required by state nonprofit regulations?" Bradley, the pseudo-lawyer, started shuffling through papers like he might find answers in his briefcase. Stan Bromwell's head bobbing reached hummingbird frequency. Patricia Gomez looked like she'd been waiting years for someone to ask these questions. But while we played legal theater, Darlene's real game continued under cover of darkness. My smart electrical monitoring system, installed after the trail camera revealed her rotation schedule, showed the full scope of her operation. She'd upgraded to industrial-grade equipment with timer controls, charging her Tesla between 2 and 6 a.m. when most people were dead asleep. The power draw had increased too, 60-plus amps during peak charging cycles. But here's what really got me. She wasn't just stealing from me anymore. My trail camera caught her installing temporary connections to 3 other houses during weekends when those families were out of town. The Millers' vacant rental property, the Johnsons' place while they visited grandkids, even Ralph's house during his medical appointment days. This woman had turned electricity theft into a science. The scratchy sound of her timer mechanism engaging at 2:17 a.m. became my cue to check the monitoring app. Every night, like clockwork, the electrical equivalent of a vampire feeding schedule. My household circuits dimmed during her charging sessions, creating brownout conditions that could damage my appliances. I'd calculated the total theft over 8 months. $1,400. In Arizona, that's felony territory with potential jail time. But Darlene wasn't content with just stealing my electricity. She decided to get creative with community enforcement. The citations started arriving daily. My mailbox positioning violated aesthetic guidelines. My work van's parking angle was non-compliant. My outdoor lighting was too bright for neighborhood standards. Each violation carried a $50 fine with escalating penalties for non-payment. When I researched each citation against actual HOA documents, none of them held water. She was literally making up rules as she went along, counting on residents being too intimidated or ignorant to fight back. That's when I realized something crucial. Most HOA tyranny depends on resident ignorance of their actual rights. The breaking point came during a neighborhood barbecue at Ralph's house. 23 of our 47 homeowners showed up, and the conversation inevitably turned to HOA frustrations. What I heard made my teeth clench. The Patel family had received $300 in fines for non-approved solar panels that were identical to ones approved for other houses. Maria Santos got cited for excessive noise when her teenage daughter practiced violin in their garage. The Morgan family faced architectural violations for a garden fence that matched 6 other identical fences in the neighborhood. The pattern was unmistakable. Anyone who questioned Darlene's authority became a target for harassment through bogus violations. But the most revealing moment came when Patricia Gomez quietly pulled me aside. "I've been keeping my own copies of financial records," she whispered, glancing around nervously. "Things don't add up. The landscaping bills alone would make your head spin." She slipped me a business card. "Coffee tomorrow? There's a lot you need to see." That bitter taste of morning coffee would never be the same after our meeting. Patricia's records revealed systematic financial mismanagement that made my electricity theft look like pocket change. We were talking about tens of thousands of dollars in suspicious expenditures, inflated contracts, and money flowing to companies owned by Darlene's relatives. I'd stumbled into something much bigger than petty theft. This was organized corruption with a Tesla-charging side hustle. But every criminal makes mistakes when they get too comfortable. Darlene's mistake was underestimating a Navy electrician's patience for planning the perfect counterattack. Patricia Gomez chose Mel's Diner for our meeting, one of those roadside spots where the coffee tastes like it was brewed sometime during the Clinton administration and the waitresses call everyone Andrew. Perfect for conversations you don't want overheard. She slid into the booth across from me carrying a manila envelope thick enough to choke a horse. Her hand shook slightly as she opened it, and I realized this woman had been carrying this burden alone for months. "I've been HOA secretary for 3 years, she began, stirring her coffee nervously. "Darlene always said I was just handling paperwork, but I kept copies of everything. Call it old teacher instincts." The documents she spread across the sticky table made my electrical theft problem look like shoplifting candy bars. $47,000, Patricia whispered. "That's how much has gone missing from our reserve fund in 18 months. We started with $23,000. Now we have $800 left." The landscaping contracts were the smoking gun. Darlene's brother-in-law Randy owned Desert Vista Landscaping, a company that apparently existed only to overcharge our HOA. Monthly invoices for $2,800 when other neighborhoods our size paid $400. Work orders for tree trimming that never happened. Irrigation repairs that involved installing sprinkler systems exclusively on Darlene's property. But that wasn't even the worst part. "The insurance," Patricia continued, pulling out another stack of papers. "She switched our coverage to her friend's agency. We're paying 30% more than market rate, and she gets a 15% referral fee that goes straight into her personal account." I nearly choked on my coffee. In most states, that's a textbook conflict of interest violation. Board members can't profit from HOA business without full disclosure and resident approval. Then came the real bombshell. Patricia had been secretly documenting Darlene's electrical theft operation for 2 months. "I drive past your street every morning on my way to work," she explained. "I started noticing the extension cords, so I began taking pictures. She's not just stealing from you, Marcus. I've got photos of her tapping into 4 different houses." The photos were damning. Darlene running cords to the vacant Miller property, connecting to the Hendersons' outlet while they visited family in California, even using Ralph's electricity during his weekly medical appointments. Patricia had calculated the total theft across all properties, over $2,000 in 8 months. Combined with the HOA embezzlement, we were looking at felony-level financial crimes. But here's what made my Navy training kick into high gear. Patricia revealed that Darlene had never properly incorporated the HOA as a non-profit corporation. She'd been operating under an expired business license for 2 years, which meant she had personal liability for every debt and legal action. "She doesn't know I found out," Patricia said. "The State Corporation Commission has no record of Willowbrook Estates HOA as an active entity. Legally, she's been collecting money and issuing fines without any authority." The implications hit me like lightning. Every violation notice, every fine, every threatening letter, all legally meaningless. Darlene had been running a protection racket disguised as community management. I remembered something from my divorce attorney years ago. When organizations operate without proper legal standing, individual board members become personally liable for all financial obligations and damages. Darlene wasn't just embezzling HOA funds, she was personally on the hook for every penny. "There's more," Patricia said, sliding over a final document. "I found her real estate license complaint history. She's facing a disciplinary hearing next month for misrepresenting property conditions to buyers. If we file a criminal complaint now, it could trigger an automatic license suspension. The pieces clicked together like a well-designed circuit. Darlene's entire livelihood depended on her real estate license, her house payments, her Tesla payments, her designer lifestyle, all funded by commissions from property sales. One phone call to the right prosecutor could unravel her entire world. Patricia looked exhausted as she packed up the documents. "I'm done being scared of her, Marcus. What do we do?" I smiled for the first time in weeks. We build a case that would make the FBI proud. Building a bulletproof case against a seasoned scammer requires the right team, and over the next week, I assembled what felt like the neighborhood version of Ocean's 11. Ralph Torino became our surveillance coordinator, sharing 18 months of security footage that documented Darlene's greatest hits: the landscaping crew's unauthorized water usage, her son's midnight cord installations, and her own prowling around properties during family vacations. The man had unknowingly been running counterintelligence operations from his living room. Patricia brought the financial smoking guns, 3 years of meticulously copied HOA records that revealed the full scope of Darlene's embezzlement scheme. But our secret weapon turned out to be Janet Crowley, a retired CPA who lived 2 streets over and had been quietly fuming about her mysterious electric bill spikes. "Honey," Janet said during our kitchen table war council, adjusting her reading glasses as she spread Patricia's documents across my granite countertop, "this woman's been running a textbook embezzlement operation. Inflated vendor contracts, kickback schemes, unauthorized personal expenses. She's hit every item on the white-collar crime bingo card." Janet's analysis was devastating. The landscaping overcharges alone totaled $31,000 above market rates. The insurance kickback scheme had netted Darlene $8,000 in referral fees that should have gone to HOA reserves. Combined with the utilities theft across multiple properties, now documented at $2,100, we were looking at over $40,000 in criminal activity. But I had a more immediate problem. Darlene was still bleeding me dry every night at exactly 2:17 a.m. That's where my Navy electrical training became invaluable. During my research into property protection laws, I discovered that homeowners have broad legal rights to defend their utilities from theft. The key phrase in Arizona statutes was reasonable protective measures that don't endanger human safety. So I designed what I euphemistically called a utility protection system. The device looked like a standard surge protector, the kind you'd buy at any hardware store, but inside I'd modified the circuitry with components that would make any electronics engineer proud. When the system detected an unauthorized electrical load above normal household usage, it would trigger a massive voltage spike designed to overwhelm whatever was drawing power illegally. The science was beautifully simple. Tesla charging systems are sophisticated computers that regulate power flow to protect the battery. They're designed for consistent 240-volt household current within specific parameters. Hit them with an irregular surge, say, a sudden spike to 280 volts with frequency fluctuations, and their protection circuits would shut down permanently to prevent fire hazards. The beauty was in the legal protection. Any damage would be caused by someone illegally accessing my electrical system. Like a burglar cutting himself on broken glass while climbing through your window, the criminal activity created the dangerous situation. My lawyer buddy Tom Kellerman confirmed the legal theory during a consultation that officially never happened. "Property owners absolutely have the right to protect utilities from theft," he said over beers at Murphy's Tavern. "As long as your system only activates when someone's stealing power, you're defending your property, not attacking theirs." Tom also helped coordinate our legal strategy. We'd file criminal complaints with the county prosecutor for theft and embezzlement, civil lawsuits for financial restitution, and ethics violations with the state real estate board. A 3-pronged attack that would hit Darlene's criminal liability, her bank account, and her professional livelihood simultaneously. The community organizing piece fell into place naturally. Our informal residence meetings at Ralph's house had grown from 5 concerned neighbors to 34 committed revolutionaries. People were done being intimidated by Darlene's manufactured authority. We scheduled our public confrontation for the next official HOA board meeting, ensuring we'd have witnesses and legal standing. Tom would attend as a concerned resident with criminal complaints ready for immediate filing. Janet would present the financial analysis. Patricia would provide the documentary evidence, and I would spring the electrical trap. The installation took place on a Tuesday afternoon while Darlene was showing houses across town. the metallic smell of electrical components mixed with desert heat as I made the final connections. Every wire perfectly positioned, every circuit tested and retested. The system was elegant in its simplicity. Detect unauthorized usage above 30 amps. Wait 60 seconds to confirm it wasn't a temporary spike, then deliver a voltage surge that would fry any sensitive electronics drawing power illegally. Safety systems ensured it wouldn't harm anyone touching the equipment, just turn expensive toys into expensive paperweights. I spent that evening reviewing Arizona law one final time. Property owners could install protective devices. Criminals bore responsibility for damage caused during illegal activities. Tesla charging systems were particularly vulnerable to electrical irregularities. Everything was legal, justified, and beautifully poetic. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for Darlene to stick her hand in the cookie jar one more time. The satisfying click of the system arming itself echoed through my garage as I locked up for the night. Tomorrow, we'd see how much Darlene really valued her precious Tesla. The 34-signature petition demanding a financial audit hit Darlene's mailbox on Wednesday morning like a legal hand grenade. By noon, she was pacing her driveway making frantic phone calls, her voice carrying across the desert air with the desperation of someone watching their house of cards collapse in real time. Her response was swift and predictably desperate. Thursday brought an emergency board meeting notice claiming authority to expel disruptive residents who were undermining community harmony. The language read like something from a Banana Republic dictator's playbook, complete with threats to place liens on properties belonging to non-compliant homeowners. But Darlene's real panic showed in her escalation tactics. Friday morning, I discovered my sprinkler system had been accidentally damaged by her landscaping crew. They'd somehow managed to drive their truck directly over 3 separate irrigation lines, flooding my front yard and creating a muddy mess that would take days to repair. When I confronted the crew chief, he shrugged and muttered something about equipment malfunctions before driving away. The timing was too convenient to be coincidental. By afternoon, anonymous complaints had been filed with the city about my work van, my security cameras, and my unlicensed electrical modifications. The code enforcement officers showed up at my door with clipboards and confused expressions, clearly baffled about what violations they were supposed to investigate. "Someone called claiming you're running an illegal business," Officer Martinez explained, glancing around my perfectly ordinary driveway. "But your contractor's license is current, your van registration is valid, and I don't see any obvious code violations." Did the complainant leave a name? Anonymous tip line. Happens more than you'd think in HOA neighborhoods. But Darlene's most creative sabotage involved targeting my livelihood. She'd somehow obtained a list of my recent customers and started making courtesy calls, expressing neighborhood concerns about my electrical work. Mrs. Peterson from Scottsdale received a call warning her about unlicensed modifications I'd allegedly made to my own property. The Hendersons got a voicemail about safety violations that existed only in Darlene's imagination. The acrid smell of desperation was becoming as overwhelming as her vanilla perfume. Meanwhile, my electrical monitoring system recorded her nightly theft continuing like clockwork. If anything, she'd become more brazen, upgrading to an 80-amp charging system that drew enough power to dim lights throughout my house. The monthly theft had escalated to over $400, and the electrical load was creating genuine safety hazards. But here's where Darlene made her fatal mistake. She hired a private investigator. Ralph's cameras caught the PI photographing houses, interviewing neighbors, and conducting what appeared to be surveillance operations on anyone who'd signed our petition. When I ran the investigator's license plate, it traced back to a company that billed the HOA landscaping account for security consulting services. She was using our own HOA funds to spy on us. Janet's forensic accounting revealed the pattern. $3,200 in security consulting charges over 2 months, all connected to investigating residents who'd asked questions about finances. It was like hiring a hitman with the victim's own money. The bribery attempt came Tuesday evening, right as I was reviewing footage of her latest cord installation. Darlene appeared at my door wearing a concerned expression that would have fooled a jury if I hadn't known better. "Marcus, I think we got off on the wrong foot," she began, her voice honeyed with fake sincerity. "Maybe we could work together instead of fighting each other." "Work together how?" "Well, you're obviously a smart guy who understands electrical systems. The HOA could use someone with your expertise on our architectural review board. There might even be consulting opportunities with our landscaping and maintenance contracts. The implied kickback offer was so blatant I almost laughed. Consulting opportunities? Our vendors are always looking for qualified electrical contractors. I could make some introductions, maybe help you expand your business. Win-win situation for everyone. I kept my voice neutral while my hidden recorder captured every word. What would you need from me in return? Just cooperation. Maybe reconsider that financial audit request. Help other residents understand that board oversight can be counterproductive. You know how these things work. The metallic taste of disgust filled my mouth, but I played along. Let me think about it. Of course, no pressure. But the consulting opportunities are time-sensitive, if you know what I mean. After she left, I sat in my darkened living room reviewing the recording. She'd just offered me a bribe using HOA funds while simultaneously threatening my livelihood if I didn't back down. The woman had criminal overconfidence that would have impressed mob bosses, but the real irony was happening outside my window. Even as Darlene tried to buy my silence, her Tesla was pulling 60 amps from my electrical system, adding another $15 to my monthly bill with every hour of charging. Her desperation was making her sloppy, and sloppy criminals make the best evidence. Darlene's final week of freedom played out like a masterclass in criminal desperation. When bribery failed, she shifted into full scorched earth mode, apparently deciding that if she was going down, she'd take the entire neighborhood with her. Her first Hail Mary was attempting to dissolve the HOA entirely. She called an emergency dissolution meeting claiming the association was financially insolvent and needed immediate termination to protect residents from liability. The irony was breathtaking. The person who'd stolen the money was now claiming poverty to avoid accountability. The meeting notice arrived with 12 hours warning, violating every procedural rule in our bylaws. But desperate people make desperate moves, and Darlene was nothing if not desperate. When that failed to gain traction, she escalated to character assassination. Anonymous flyers appeared on windshields throughout the neighborhood, describing me as an unstable veteran with anger management issues. The language was carefully crafted to avoid outright defamation while planting seeds of doubt about my mental health. Classic smear campaign tactics designed to undermine my credibility before our public confrontation. But her Facebook offensive was where she really showed her colors. Posts appeared in our neighborhood group questioning my aggressive behavior and suggesting my military background made me prone to violent solutions. She even managed to work in concerns about my obsession with recording neighbors and paranoid surveillance activities. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me. A woman who'd been systematically stealing from her neighbors was questioning my character on social media. Her crowning achievement in stupidity came when she filed a false police report claiming I'd threatened her during a hostile confrontation. According to her statement, I'd made veiled threats about consequences during our bribery conversation. What she didn't know was that I'd recorded the entire exchange, including her nervous laughter when she thought she was buying my silence. The responding officer, Detective Rodriguez, listened to my recording with the weary expression of someone who'd dealt with HOA drama before. "Ma'am," he told Darlene during their follow-up interview, "filing false reports is a misdemeanor. You sure you want to proceed with this complaint?" She withdrew it faster than a Tesla accelerating off the line. But while Darlene played neighborhood politics, her real addiction continued unabated. My electrical monitoring system recorded her most audacious theft yet. She'd upgraded to a commercial-grade charging system that drew 80 amps during peak cycles. The thing was pulling more power than some small businesses. The scratchy sound of her timer engaging at 2:17 a.m. had become my daily reminder that justice was coming. Every night, like clockwork, my protection system detected the massive unauthorized load and armed itself for the perfect moment to strike back. What made her final week especially satisfying was watching her scramble to rally support. She organized a counterpetition supporting her leadership, but only managed to collect 7 signatures, mostly from people who barely spoke English and clearly didn't understand what they were signing. Meanwhile, our revolution had grown to 41 committed residents ready to end her reign of terror. Patricia's resignation from the board was Darlene's final wake-up call that her empire was crumbling. When Patricia submitted her letter citing irreconcilable differences regarding financial management and ethical conduct, it triggered automatic state oversight requirements for HOA board transitions. Darlene tried blocking Patricia's resignation, claiming the board couldn't function without a secretary. But Janet had researched the relevant statutes. Board members have absolute right to resign, and attempts to prevent resignation constitute illegal coercion. The legal noose was tightening from multiple directions. Tom Kellerman spent the week preparing our criminal complaints with prosecutor-level precision. Theft charges for the electrical stealing, embezzlement charges for the financial mismanagement, ethics violations for the real estate license abuse. Each document cross-referenced with evidence that would make a forensic accountant weep with joy. But the most beautiful part was watching Darlene's desperation manifest in her Tesla charging schedule. Instead of reducing her theft to avoid detection, she'd actually increased it, charging twice daily, morning and evening, pulling maximum amperage like someone addicted to the thrill of getting away with crime. My protection system waited patiently, monitoring every unauthorized amp flowing through my electrical panel. The device had been armed for 6 days, ready to trigger the moment conditions were perfect for maximum impact. I'd even scheduled a convenient weekend vacation to Phoenix, loudly announcing my departure to neighbors and posting about it on social media. Let Darlene think she had free rein to steal with impunity while I was away. The cold sweat of anticipation mixed with Arizona morning heat as I reviewed our final preparations. Tomorrow was the board meeting where we'd present our evidence. 41 residents were ready to vote Darlene into oblivion. Tom had criminal complaints ready for immediate filing. But tonight, Darlene's Tesla would get one final taste of my electricity with a voltage surprise that would turn her $80,000 status symbol into the world's most expensive paperweight. The trap was armed. The bait was irresistible. All that remained was watching the predator destroy herself. Saturday morning, 2:17 a.m. The timer clicked on schedule just like it had for 8 months. But this time, my protection system was ready. I watched remotely from my Phoenix hotel room as Darlene's Tesla began its final feeding session. The electrical monitoring app on my phone showed the familiar spike, 80 amps drawing steadily from my system. My protection device detected the massive unauthorized load, waited 60 seconds to confirm it wasn't a temporary surge, then delivered its electrical surprise. The explosion of sparks lit up security cameras across 3 properties. A sharp crack echoed through the desert silence, followed by the acrid smell of burning electronics that would linger for hours. My trail camera captured Darlene's Tesla charging port erupting in a shower of blue sparks before every dashboard light died simultaneously. The vehicle's entire electrical system, battery management, computer controls, even the door locks fried beyond repair. Darlene's screams woke half the neighborhood. By sunrise, she was calling emergency tow trucks, electricians, and probably exorcists to diagnose what had happened to her precious Tesla. The repair estimate would eventually reach $23,000 more than the car's remaining book value for a complete electrical system replacement. But the real fireworks started Sunday evening at our scheduled HOA board meeting. 44 of 47 residents packed into the community center, with Channel 12 News setting up cameras after an anonymous tip about neighborhood corruption. Detective Rodriguez attended as an interested observer, and Tom Kellerman sat in the back row with a briefcase full of criminal complaints. Darlene arrived in a rental Kia, looking like she'd aged 5 years in 2 days. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled, her designer outfit wrinkled, and her trademark confidence had evaporated like water on hot asphalt. "Before we begin tonight's meeting," she announced shakily, "I want to address the malicious destruction of my personal property. Someone sabotaged my Tesla with an illegal electrical device, and I demand—" "Point of order," Patricia interrupted from the front row. "This meeting was called to address HOA financial irregularities. Personal property disputes aren't board business." "My Tesla was destroyed by Marcus Hendricks using an illegal—" "Actually," I said, standing up with my folder of evidence, "your Tesla was destroyed by your own criminal activity. When you illegally tap into someone's electrical system, you assume responsibility for any consequences." The room erupted in murmurs as I began my presentation. For the past 8 months, Darlene Wickshire has been systematically stealing electricity from multiple properties in our neighborhood. I have documented evidence of over $2,000 in theft, which constitutes felony-level criminal activity in Arizona. I displayed security camera footage on my laptop, connected to the community center's projector. There was Darlene, running extension cords under cover of darkness, her son installing backup theft equipment, the landscaping crew filling their truck with stolen water. But electricity theft is just the beginning, I continued. Janet Crowley will now present her forensic analysis of our HOA finances. Janet stood up with the confidence of someone who'd spent 30 years catching embezzlers. Ladies and gentlemen, in 18 months, Darlene Wickshire has stolen or misappropriated over $52,000 from our community reserves. The gasps were audible as Janet detailed the inflated landscaping contracts, the insurance kickback schemes, and the use of HOA funds to hire private investigators to spy on questioning residents. Furthermore, Janet continued, Ms. Wickshire has been operating this HOA without proper incorporation for over 2 years, making her personally liable for every debt and legal action. Darlene's face went through more color changes than a chameleon in a paint store. These are lies, completely fabricated by disgruntled residents who— Ms. Wickshire, Detective Rodriguez interrupted, standing up from his back row seat. Based on evidence provided by Mr. Hendricks and corroborated by multiple witnesses, I'm placing you under arrest for theft of utilities and embezzlement of community funds. The handcuffs clicking shut were the most satisfying sound I'd heard since my discharge from the Navy. You have the right to remain silent, Rodriguez continued as Channel 12's cameras rolled. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. The community center erupted in applause that lasted nearly 2 minutes. Residents who'd been terrorized by Darlene's petty tyranny finally had their moment of catharsis. As she was led away in cuffs, Darlene made one final desperate plea. Marcus destroyed my Tesla with an illegal device. He's the real criminal here. I smiled and delivered the line I'd been rehearsing for weeks. Ma'am, I installed a legal property protection system that only activates when someone commits a crime. Your Tesla was destroyed by your own criminal activity, just like your life is about to be. The news footage would show 44 neighbors cheering as their neighborhood tyrant finally faced consequences for 8 months of theft, corruption, and harassment. Justice had been served with 280 volts and a side of public humiliation. The legal aftermath unfolded like dominoes falling in perfect sequence. Darlene pleaded guilty to felony theft and misdemeanor embezzlement 6 weeks later, probably hoping to avoid the media circus of a public trial. The judge sentenced her to 18 months supervised probation, $8,000 in restitution, and 200 hours of community service, ironically, maintaining public parks with the same landscaping skills she'd supposedly been paying her brother-in-law to perform. Her real estate license vanished faster than water in the Arizona sun. The state board didn't just suspend it, they revoked it permanently after discovering she'd been using her professional credentials to facilitate HOA fraud. The dream house in Willowbrook Estates went on the market within a month, with Darlene forced to sell at a loss to cover legal fees and civil judgments. But the community transformation was what really mattered. Patricia Gomez stepped into the HOA presidency with unanimous support, immediately implementing the kind of transparent governance that should have existed from day one. We properly incorporated under Arizona nonprofit law, hired a legitimate accounting firm for monthly financial reviews, and reduced HOA fees to $45 per month while actually improving services. The inflated landscaping contracts disappeared overnight. Randy's Desert Vista Landscaping found itself competing with legitimate vendors who charged market rates for actual work. Our common areas began looking like someone actually cared about them, instead of using them as personal piggy banks. The recovered funds, over $41,000 in restitution, and returned misappropriated money, gave us options we'd never had before. The community voted to establish the Willowbrook Veterans Scholarship, providing $15,000 annually to military families pursuing electrical and mechanical trade education. As a Navy veteran who'd found purpose in skilled trades, having my name associated with that program meant more than any revenge ever could. My contracting business flourished after the media coverage. Turns out, Navy electrician outsmarts HOA thief was excellent marketing. Property owners across the Phoenix area started requesting consultations about electrical security systems, and my design became the basis for a commercially manufactured anti-theft device that's now sold in hardware stores across Arizona. The personal healing surprised me most. After Sarah's death, I'd moved to Willowbrook hoping to find peace in anonymity. Instead, I found something better, a community worth fighting for, and neighbors who became genuine friends. Ralph and I started a weekly poker game that draws half the neighborhood. Patricia and I served together on the scholarship selection committee. Even Janet's become my go-to person for financial advice, though she still won't let me forget that my bookkeeping needs improvement. Our annual Neighborhood Heroes block party, held every October on the anniversary of Darlene's arrest, has become the model for community celebrations across the valley. We barbecue, share stories, and remember that ordinary people can accomplish extraordinary things when they work together against petty tyrants. The broader impact exceeded anything I'd imagined. Our story became a case study in Arizona's HOA reform legislation, with new laws requiring financial transparency and making board member removal much easier. I testified before the state legislature about resident rights, and our documentation methods are now taught in community organization workshops across the Southwest. But perhaps the sweetest justice came 18 months later, when I discovered that Darlene's brother-in-law, Randy, was facing his own criminal charges for contractor fraud in 2 other cities. The inflated billing scheme she'd pioneered in our neighborhood was apparently a family business model. Sometimes karma needs a little help getting started, but once it builds momentum, it's unstoppable. The final twist arrived last spring when the city announced plans for a community solar project, funded partly by grants available to neighborhoods with proven energy conservation initiatives. Our reformed HOA qualified for $85,000 in solar panel installation across common areas, reducing everyone's electricity costs by an average of $30 per month. The irony was perfect. Darlene's electricity theft ultimately led to lower electric bills for everyone she'd victimized. As I write this, sitting in my backyard workshop with the smell of desert sage drifting through open windows and the sound of children playing in our newly maintained common areas, I'm reminded that the best revenge isn't always getting even. It's building something better from the wreckage left by people who only know how to take. Share your HOA nightmare stories in the comments below. Let's expose these petty tyrants wherever they're hiding. And subscribe for more justice stories where underdogs outsmart corrupt systems. Because next week I'm telling you about the city council member who tried to ban food trucks, so we got her recalled instead. Sometimes the best defense is a good offense, and the sweetest victory is watching criminals destroy themselves with their own greed.